I'm an old boy, I'm liable to say that the old was better. I think we didn't really know what we were doing. In fact, the situation was dire, because on the whole, men don't go to church in this country. God had opened one of the few churches that is right at the heart of the financial quarter, and nobody would want to go to one of those churches because there was no one there. The 1950s were an astonishingly important decade. I took Bible studies to some of these businessmen. These men were determined to have a gospel meeting once a week. And so when St. Helens came up as a vacancy, Tony, who was a member of the Merchant Tailors Company, persuaded them to interview me. In my second interview, things weren't going so well. They were out of their depth. They didn't know what to say. An old boy sitting near the window, and we've never discovered who it was, said, "May I ask Mr. Lucas some questions?" The chairman, desperate for help, said, "Oh, please do." And this old boy said, "Mr. Lucas, I gather you've been speaking at some services in the city, at St. Mary Abbot Church." "Yes, sir," I said, "I have." I could hardly say other. "And I gather that the church has been full." "Yes, sir, it has." "And I gather that it is full after 6 months, and if not fuller." To which I could only say, "Yes, sir, that is true." And that was the end of the interview. So they appointed me. Now, of course, it was quite an impossibility. It was an extraordinary position. By and large, in our day, the lunch hour was a time when everybody came out for a bit of fresh air and a walk around and to buy a sandwich. So it was a wonderful mission field. These 10, 11 businessmen who'd met for prayer and study, they really got going, and they combed the city for all their friends. So all that happened was we started a Tuesday service.
A colleague of mine at the office, I asked him whether we could meet on Tuesday. He said, "I can't do Tuesdays." "Why can't you do Tuesday?" "Because I go to lunch service." And I said, "Oh, can I come?" So I actually invited myself.
So we made it possible for them by giving them a lunch, which was sandwiches, but really good ones. Not your real rubbish that you buy at the sandwich shop.
My first visit there, I just couldn't believe my eyes. People were crammed into pews, sitting on steps, and must have been 600 or 700 people, and all wanting to hear God's word. I'd never seen anything like it.
By 1:05, men were coming through the door 4 or 5 abreast. And really from the start, God's hand was on it. These men had prayed for many years. And at its best, it was just an extraordinary scene.
When the preacher, who was Dick Lucas, started speaking from the Bible, I'd never seen anyone preach from the Bible, even though I've been going to church for many years. The more he spoke, the more uncomfortable I became, because clearly the Bible was saying that I wasn't a Christian and that I was a sinner. His preaching was frighteningly direct. I mean, it was jugular preaching. Well, you don't expect to be mugged by an Edwardian gentleman, but that's precisely what Dick does with the gospel. One really felt convicted, very powerful, because he had absolute belief in God's word. About a year later, I knelt down on my bedside and asked Jesus into my life, and really everything's gone from there.
I did that every Tuesday except when I was on holiday, but on the whole that went on for 37 years. Ronnie Wilcox had his office just outside the front door. He was the epitome of the city gent in the city. All his life, he had a business that hummed, but wherever there was a need for the gospel, he did everything that he could to support me. He was what you call a gospel patron, and it gave him such enormous joy. Anyhow, he came into St. Helens and thoroughly enjoyed things. People warmed to him immediately because of his generosity. He had an yes, I'd forgotten this, he had an instinctive wisdom. Yeah, that's an enormous gift, isn't it? Very rare. Ronnie wanted to support me, and therefore you felt that, you were conscious of that. and you knew that you could turn to him. He was not a good driver. Well, we'd be weaving through the traffic, with no understanding that there was somebody else on the road, and we'd move across, and within 2 inches of a bus, and you'd just get a little polite toot of protest. And Ron would say to me, "What are they all making sort of fuss about today, Dick?" And I'd say, "Oh, it's the hot weather, Ronald." But actually, it was a little protest of the fact that he'd nearly gone under their bonnet. Yes, this is a good memory, actually. He would be horrified. I think he'd be rather hurt for me to say that, but I think now that he's in heaven, he wouldn't mind the truth.
I think Dick, having built a platform of Bible ministry at St. Helens, saw the need for training across the country and beyond.
In the 80s, there was a sort of tidal wave in evangelical churches that was sweeping the Bible out. Where was the new generation of younger preachers going to come from? And so a number of us were quite concerned about that, and we got together and met with Dick.
I think my generation of young men inherited from before the Second World War what you would call devotional preaching. Often not prepared, but very heartwarming, passion, gospel-centeredness, but not a serious handling of the Bible.
And so he had a germ of an idea of setting up a training course to train ministers to preach effectively.
At my 25th anniversary, I said to Ronald, "I don't want a silver teapot or something useless like that." I don't know if I said anything more than that. And he wrote a check for $25,000. And another businessman who's now in heaven wrote a check for $25,000. It may not seem a lot of money today, but that was the foundation of all this, the $50,000. It enabled us to rent a very small office and a secretary. Yeah, no, it was Ronald who suddenly said, "Why don't you call it the Proclamation Trust?" And that's part of Ronnie's legacy, isn't it? I remember driving down the A3 to ask David if he would leave the church of which he was the minister and come and take the first ever of the Cornhill training courses.
And David did a great work in getting it off the ground and building it up.
The first year, we have 15 students. And of course, what happens is they understand how to handle the Bible. They begin to get it into their DNA, and they begin to say, this is what we need at home. So when I go back, I want to start something like this.
And the overflow of that was seen in the revival in many churches.
He was absolutely brilliant at that.
Biblical truth brings people alive, and they start to say, now I feel I know God, I'm encountering him.
And since then, the work has grown dramatically. Upwards of 1,500 have gone through the course.
They're all over the place now, in different countries around the world.
Next to Billy Graham, Dick Lucas has put more people in pulpits throughout the world through the ministry at St. Helens and the Proclamation Trust than any other.
I think I've come to realize, actually late in life, just how important a man of great ability is. Well, there is a connection there, isn't there, which I think some people ignore. They don't realize how it all happens. You have to have a generation of people raised up to proclaim the gospel, but you also have to have a generation who are prepared to support the gospel to a sacrificial extent.
God had provided Dick with this important patron.
I think even Ronnie, who is not a grasping person, I think even he could see that the latter part of his life had been a very happy one because he'd given so much and gained so much. And he must be rejoicing in the fruit of what he did because, in a sense, what he has sown was something comparatively small, which has grown into something very big. I just think I want to thank him for his partnership, really.